Let's talk about the Sermon on the Mount. Hello, my friends, and welcome to another video on the Level Up Spirit channel. It is I, John, here to talk to you about today's topic, which is the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount is an amazing story, spoken of in the book of Matthew. There's a lot of history to this, and I want to, before I dive into the sermon itself, I want to dive into a little bit of the background on the sermon itself, and also the history of the area. Right now, if you go to the Holy Land, you can go to what's known as Beatitude's Hill, and Beatitude's Hill was established in 1939. So the site, they think it might have been the place. So you find when you go over to the Holy Land, there's a lot of think it might have been here kind of talk everywhere you go. They're not really sure. They have no idea where the actual sites are. And in another video, I'll talk about Saint Helena of Constantinople, better known as Constantine's mother, and how she became one of the early saints of the Catholic Church. But we'll talk about that on a different video, probably on the John of New channel at that. But I want to talk about Beatitudes specifically, and the sermon itself, because the sermon has some really great things in it, and some really very much dogmatic teaching stuff in it. And when you look at the actual writing of the New Testament, it was written in Greek at first, but the interesting thing about the writings, the early writings, is they were coming from Messianic sects of Judaism. So the earliest writings had very specific agendas. They wanted people to believe in the Messianic sect's belief. They wanted them to believe in a Messiah, believe in a Savior, and they were coming from the Judaic perspective. They wanted people to follow Judaic law. And so when you look at the Beatitudes or the Sermon on the Mount, you find very quickly that the sermon is very much a mishmash of really cool and very compelling teachings. And then the second half, and actually more than half, is all of the Judaic law you have to follow. So it shows this really interesting truth about a lot of things, but then it tells you to follow the law of a Messiah, and that there's a Messiah, and this Messiah is coming, and you have to follow the laws of Judaism. And one of the things I do very clearly remember was in my memory is avoiding the Essenes, because they wanted Jeshua to come out as a Messiah, and he wouldn't do it. They wanted him to become a Messiah and then a king, and then raise an army and fight Rome. And he wouldn't do it because, number one, he didn't believe in Messiahs, saviors, or Christs, because his whole teaching was about empowering us. Greater works than I've done you will do. It is your faith that heals you. And all those empowering statements were about us. He washed his disciples' feet to prove that he was no better than they. So the idea of the Judaic laws waiting for the Messiah, and even taking the mantle of Messiah, did not fit into what he was teaching at all. But when the books were written, they were written by the sects that really wanted those laws out there. So now that I've said that, let's dive into the actual sermon, because this will take us a little bit of time because there's a lot in there. So let's just take over to the first one. The first half of the sermon is the Beatitudes. So let me dive over there. Matthew 5. Seeing the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him. He opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Poor in spirit. On my channel, I talk a lot about coming here and experiencing our separation from Source, experiencing our troubles, our strifes, our struggles, and how those troubles, strifes, and struggles are actually a blessing because they let us come to know God more fully. They let us come to know love more fully by experiencing the separation of it. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The people who are struggling so desperately and having very traumatic situations are really experiencing a very serious separation from love, from God. And so, because they're in such poor spirit, they're literally feeling the dichotomy, which will make their feeling of love and God even more profound when it happens. So, in other words, he's basically saying, when you are at your lowest time, realize that it too is a part of your coming to know God, coming to know the Source. Now, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Because they have this experience and they now know. Once they go back and they experience it, they will now experience it more fully. So that's the first of the Beatitudes. Let's go to the second now. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. When we mourn for people, we're literally mourning for the loss of someone's love. We mourn for someone or something, and that there's an expression of love associated with that person that you're mourning or that thing that you're mourning. And so that expression of love is the feeling of the connection. But the reality of it is that here in the physical plane is the only place we experience that shadow of death, here in this physical plane. And when people cross over, our grief, our mourning, is for not feeling their love or having that love in our lives anymore. But they shall be comforted because the people who are mourning are the ones who are away, the ones who are here in the physical world experiencing that separation. The ones who've crossed have left the body and the struggles of life and have been folded back into the pure love and oneness of God. In the book of John it says, no fear can exist in pure love. When you cross over, you are immersed in a pure love that you'll never experience anywhere else. And words in the physical world are imperfect. You cannot describe it. I have been blessed in my life to have this experience on multiple occasions. And it is undescribable. It is absolutely indescribable. But blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. This is a message of hope to let them know they will get past this, and they will, as they cross over and they come to their oneness with God, they will see their relatives, their friends, the ones they've lost again, and they'll be folded back into the oneness with them, and they'll come to understand, and they'll be comforted by the fact that they were never alone. They only felt that way. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. It's a hotly contested topic, the word meek. People think it means weakness or cowardice or fear. But in reality, what I believe this is saying is those who live in a peaceful state, the meek. I often tell the story of my friend Jerry standing in front of me, pointing at his nose at his finger at my nose, saying terrible, horrible things, screaming horribly. And rather than get defensive, I took an exhale and I let him just vent. I knew that he was in fear, so I did not give him the reaction that his action was looking for. I just stood there and I breathed. I showed no fear. I did not back down. And I just stood there. And I let him yell and I let him scream. And I said, Jerry, I'm so sorry this is happening to you. Wasn't intentional. How do we solve it? And he stormed off. And he came back later and says, John, I'm so sorry. I was just mad, right? In that situation, I was the meek one. I was the one who didn't succumb to the anxiety, the stresses, and have a reaction that would escalate the situation. I call it being an action hero rather than a reaction zero. But even in being an action hero, I was the meek one. I was the one who did not raise my emotions to a physical altercation. I stayed meek. And in the end of the day, I won because he came back, apologized to me, and realized that I was right in that situation. So the meek inherit the earth because the meek always win out over the hot-headed, which is a great thing to know right now because in our society here in America, the hotheads are yelling and screaming and hollering, but the meek are winning. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Righteousness. This statement this word is an interesting word. What is righteousness? Now, many people will take righteousness as they are right? And a lot of religions nowadays tell you that they are righteous, right? Because they are right with what their religion tells them to be. For me, righteousness means something a little different. Righteousness means being right with love, means not missing the mark, means the world is supposed to be a loving place, so we act in a loving way, and we are in the righteous place of loving. And blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Many people in the world are hungering and thirsting for peace and love and prosperity in our world. What this statement is him saying, those who are focusing on that, you're going to be satisfied. It's going to happen. He's literally saying, this world that's set aright is going to happen, and it's going to happen in due course. So the idea of this really is, don't worry. That's what this line is. You're hungering and thirsting for righteousness. You'll be satisfied. It'll happen. And stay in that space of we are creating a joyful, beautiful, loving world. And you're hungering and thirsting for others to follow suit. But as I often say, your job isn't to save the world. Your job is to make your part so bright that the world saves itself. And so rather than focusing on the hunger and the thirst for righteousness, right? Focus on the joyful, loving world you're creating. As Mother Teresa said when they asked her to go to the anti-war rally, no, I won't go. Have a peace rally and I'll come. Focus on the peace, focus on the love, focus on the world, and embody it yourself. Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. Be the love. But the hunger and the thirst is literally focusing on declaring the lack of it. Focusing on the angst and the anger and the war. It is the anti-war focus. Focus on the peace. Because it's coming. And this was a message of telling them to not worry, because it will happen. He was trying to put them into a space of going, and exhaling. And coming back to that space of realizing that they were going to get the outcome they desired. Let's move on to the next one. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. What a beautiful statement, right? Merciful. I often tell the story of getting on a plane, or a flight anyway, waiting to get on a plane. And they inform us that they're going to have to bump some people from seats because they overbooked. And I watched people going up and yelling and screaming and really getting mad at the people behind the counter who were having to deal with this. And when I watched this going on, I felt for the person working behind the counter, because it really wasn't her responsibility. It wasn't really her fault. So I walked up to the counter, and I said, "You guys are doing a great job. Thank you so much. I would like to get on this flight, but if I can't and you need me to bump, I can do that. But I really would like to get there. But, whatever you need, you just do. And you have my blessing to do it. Because, you're doing a great job, and you should not be having to deal with this responsibility. And thank you for your work." And I walked away. And the lady was kind of shocked that I said it. And I stood over by the pillar in eye shot of that desk. And I watched people come just scream and yell and holler and upset and angry. And as they did that, I watched her get more and more frustrated with the people. And at one point, a guy was yelling at her. And she looked over her shoulder and she saw me standing there in peace, in beautiful mercy for her. She saw the mercy I had for her. And what did she do? As the guy was yelling at her, her hands went to her keyboards, and she started typing, and she started doing all kinds of stuff. And the guy was yelling, and finally she says, "Hold on." She points at me, calls me over, hands me my ticket so I can get on the plane. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. When you give someone mercy, when you give someone the respect of seeing the struggles and offering assistance, you're giving them mercy. And they will give mercy in return. They will give you the love and respect that you gave them. What you sow, you do reap. And so by being merciful, you will get mercy. Blessed are the poor in heart, for they shall see God. The story of Adam and Eve is an interesting story. And everyone seems to miss the moral of that story. The moral of that story is an interesting one. The moral is that they ate from the tree of knowledge and they got kicked out of paradise. They got in their heads and out of their hearts. They got out of their hearts, right? Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. The people who get out of their heads and back into their hearts, back into their feelings. God speaks to us in feelings. And from my own personal experience, the more I stripped away of the dogmas and the rituals and the methods and modalities and techniques and all of those things, the more I stripped away, the more God was revealed, the more aha moments I had, the less dogmatic belief, new age or old, the less I had, the more I stripped away, I saw more of my personal divinity, my personal relationship with my oneness with God. And so, blessed are the pure in heart. Now, to become pure in heart, you set your fear down, because no fear can exist in pure love. And your heart is where the love is centered, right? So you come to this space and you just love, be loving. And when you're being loving, you'll see God, because then you come to understand that God is love. And when you're being loving, you're expressing God to the world. And God is expressing love back to you. And you come to this expression of being one with God. And as Jeshua said, the Father and I are one, right? Ye are gods, is what he says. So in that regard, being that one with God, being pure in heart, being that love into the world, you will literally see God, because God is everything around you. But if you want to see love, which is the expression of God, according to the book of John, great book, by the way, You have to come to know love from all angles. And that's what the being pure of heart is being love and releasing your fears. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God. Peacemakers, people who make peace, people who make an environment where people don't have to fear, people who create the environment of love, people who show the world a loving space so that peace can exist, the people who make peace. They recognize themselves as being one with God. They recognize themselves as being the sons of God, the daughters of God. Jeshua himself in the Bible says, you are the children of God, meaning you're one with God. You and God are one and combined. And when you are making peace, you are creating love. And creating love, you are expressing God. And as a child of God, which is a unnecessary hierarchy, in my opinion, I believe we're God and I are one. There is no hierarchy in that. There is no father and son or mother and daughter. There is the oneness of God. And when I look at the sons of God, that's a very 2,000-year-old archaic sort of way of looking at it. But the statement, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God, they'll be recognized for their peacemaking. They'll be recognized, the people who are bringing love to the world. They are recognized. That's why they're called the sons of God or the children of God or whatever, because they are a direct line from love, which is God. And so, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God. In other words, they'll be recognized for their bringing love to the world, for bringing peace to the world. And in that, they'll be recognized as being of God, bringing that expression, that feeling of God to the here and now. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. I talked earlier about what righteousness is. It's creating a beautiful, loving world, the making things right, making things. Now, I'm not talking about dogmatic righteousness. I'm talking about creating a world where we all can go, relax. There are many in the world who will persecute you for being the one who says things are nice, that things are coming better, and making peace. So when you look at this, you're persecuted for righteousness' sake. You're out there sharing love, you're spreading love, and some people just aren't going to like it, and they will come after you. I recently did a video about the trolls who come at me sometimes, and the one guy, he was vehement and angry because I said the world is beautiful and that you're divine and you can create your experience. And when you went to his site, it was all about the world being a sewer matrix, right? The world being a negative space. And he got angry and yelled and hollered and called me fat and all these things, right? But when I look at what happened there was, he was afraid of what I was saying. And what I was saying was, the world can be a beautiful place if you just take responsibility and step into your role of creation. And he was literally selling this fear-based negativity because he was trying to grow a fear-based audience so that he could basically take advantage of that situation. But I was the one he was coming after. I was the one who was being persecuted for righteousness' sake. He saw me as a threat because I didn't speak to his fear-based narrative. I spoke to people's empowerment, people's ability to create a loving world and a loving life. And so they were persecuting me for righteousness' sake. Now here's the last part of this. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That person who is persecuting me and the people that are talking about in this beatitude is they're in a foul state. They're in a negative state. They have to lash out and call names and slander and do all that because they themselves are living a living hell in their mind, right? That's what their focus is. But my life is joyful. My life is loving. Every day someone tells me they love me. Every day someone tells me they love me. And I love them in return. But that's my goal, is to put love into the world. And when you put love into something, love always is returned to you, right? This person was afraid of that and was, quote unquote, persecuting me for righteousness' sake. But I'm living joyfully. I'm living the kingdom of heaven. I've brought heaven to earth in my world. I live in a magnificent world, in a joyful world, in a loving world, because I've set down my fears and my anxieties. Does that mean I'm completely free of them? Of course not. You wouldn't be here in the physical world if you didn't have some fears and anxieties, because that's why we're here, to experience those. But my world is so much smoother, so much easier, and so much more joyful than most people I know, because I have chosen that. I've chosen to live a loving life. And by choosing to live a loving life, you will be persecuted for righteousness' sake, but you'll be living your kingdom of heaven. You will have brought heaven to your earth. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. This is him saying, what I'm teaching you is going to rile people up. And they're going to come at you, and they're going to persecute you, and they're going to say terrible things about you, and they're going to say it's because of that Jesus stuff, right? I recently was doing a private session with someone, and it was about his 6th or 7th time he'd come back to me. I'm about to cut him off permanently because he's not learning. But at the end of his last session, he wasn't taking responsibility. He was using me as a crutch. And at the end of his last sessions, he says, "You and this effing," he didn't say effing though, Jesus BS, and he didn't say BS. It's all BS. It's all BS. And he's like, F this and F that, and you got a big mouth and blah, blah, blah. And I knew it wasn't me that he was lashing out with. It was the truth that I had said to him. I said, you need to take responsibility. You need to step up and do something. And he didn't like me saying that to him because I was speaking truth to him, right? But he literally said, you and this effing Jesus BS, right? When I think of this guy over my shoulder back here, I think of a loving, amazing, funny guy who showed me a way of living, a life to express. He showed me the way, the truth, and the life, pretty much. And I often get persecuted by people who want to knock me down. It's interesting, though. The majority of the ones who want to do it are Christians. The most vehement and mean people I get are the Christians. Never had a Buddhist say a word. Never had a Hindu say a word. Never had a Muslim say a word. Never had a Baha'i say a word. Or, even Wiccas or whatever. They might go Jesus, whatever, but they don't persecute me personally. That's always the Christians who come at me that way, because they have to be right. And you can blame that on Constantine, because at the Nicene Council they made Jeshua the Son of God as opposed to an enlightened man. And when that happened, everybody else was wrong. And so now the people who follow that belief, everybody else is wrong. And that creates a horrible jump. But this thing says these things are going to happen. But rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. He's basically saying when you cross over, you're gonna experience so much more, and I talk about when people have NDEs and experience hell. They believe in a hell. They believe that they've done something that deserved to be in hell. So they experience a hell. And in experiencing a hell, they are going through their belief, right? But if I stay true to my beliefs, no matter what anybody says, I stay true to what felt true to me from his teachings, my reward is great in heaven because I don't have that painful transition going through all the feelings of hurt and anger and all that, because I've overcome that. I've come to a place of being closer to God. My mom, who master's degree in liturgy, head of liturgical doctrine in our Catholic Church, she was a Catholic woman. She was so Catholic we called her jokingly St. Joan. But she has come back and talked to my sisters and myself through a medium, surprisingly. And the one thing about my mom that was so spectacular was she didn't take her Catholicism as this dogmatic ceremony. She took spirituality as the way you live and what you do. And she was going out and doing amazing, beautiful, loving gestures to people and not telling anybody. She was cooking meals for people who had no money. She was grocery shopping for people who had no food. She was delivering meals on wheels. She was doing everything. She was an amazing individual, right? And when she came through the medium, my sister was when my mom passed, my sister was very upset. And my mom was in Florida alone when she died. And my sister had created this story around her passing, that mom was in pain and it was a horror, all alone, and a friend in pain, and it was a terrible thing. And mom came through for me in one of those sessions, but my sister was in the room. And my mom said, I need you, through the medium, she says, I need you to know I had no pain. I was right where I wanted to be. And it was like I was there, and then I was here. My mom had done so many good things in her life that the transition was just like there and here. She was just there, right? She transitioned through the veil of her belief because her veil was so thin. She was just here, and then she was there. So great is the kingdom, great is the reward in heaven. And then he says at the end of this, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. He's saying they did it to other people too, and they made it, basically. So blessed are those who revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. And this is the last of the blessed are you statements, the Beatitudes, right? And here's where the history of this document kind of changes. It starts to morph. It starts to go into this concept of you must stay in line with Judaic law. So the next part of this is the salt and the light. So the blessed are you is done. So now it goes, you are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? For it is no longer good for anything except for to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. So this is where the foundation stones of worthiness begin to be laid in this next piece. They're basically saying to you that you need to be worthy. You need to realize that if you are not being worthy, then you're going to be trampled underfoot. It's starting to lay the groundwork of fear. Everything before this was like, blessed be. Feel this beautiful statement. Blessed are you who. Blessed are you who are. And then number 13 comes and it says, you're going to be trampled underfoot if you don't do what I say. That's basically where this starts to shift into the Judaic Messianic belief system. It starts to put you in place of a hierarchy. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to the Father who is in heaven. How many times in my videos have you heard me say, you can't save the world. You can only make your part of the world so bright that others take notice. That's what this statement is saying, right? You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. In other words, don't hide your goodness. Go out and share openly. And it's the first part of this is beautiful. Literally saying, let your light shine before others, so they may see your good works and give glory. Now here's where the last part is. Give glory to the Father who is in heaven. So this last part is the Father in heaven is that 2,000-year-old patriarchal society, father figure that is taking its iconography from Judaism. But if you took the Father in heaven, who is in heaven, out of there, or if you just take the who is in heaven, heaven being the feeling of love, and we give glory to the feeling of love, right? They may see your good works and give glory to the feeling of love, or give glory to love. God is love. So this statement is actually very good, but it still has this patriarchal twist to it. So let me jump to the next one, because this is the big one. Do not think I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth passes away, not an iota, not a dot will pass from the law, until all is accomplished. Therefore, whosoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven, but whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. You know what? If you don't follow our rules, if you don't follow our laws, if you don't match our dogmas, and you don't tell everybody else to do the same, then you're not going to make it to heaven. This is one of the biggest fear-based statements based in Judaic Messianic law that there is in this whole speech. It's literally meant to make you afraid of not being good. It's literally to make you afraid of not going to heaven. It's literally to make you afraid of going to hell. It's starting to set up that groundwork of, you got to do what we say. And it doesn't start with blessed be. It starts with, do not think that I have come to abolish the law. He's literally saying, and he says that it is literally saying, you have to follow the laws of Moses, right? It really is antithetical to what Jeshua taught. It also, if you just go back and read the accounts of what he did, he broke the laws all the time. Traveled on the Sabbath. He spoke to another man's wife. He ministered to the Gentiles, and the Romans and all the people who did not fit in. He didn't. None of it mattered, right? He was traveling on Sabbath. You're not supposed to travel on the Sabbath ever, right? There's no accounting anywhere in the Bible of Jeshua baptizing anyone. That is a Christian thing. That was a John the Baptist thing. But why would they do that? Because the people who wrote the New Testament were from a Messianic Judaic cult or sect, like the Essenes, right? And If you ever visited Qumran, which I was very happy that I had that chance, the site is littered with ceremonial baths. They were all about the water and spirituality. It was part of their ritual. So, do I believe that John the Baptist was probably in a scene? Probably so. And he was very much baptizing in water because that was part of the Messianic Judaic belief. But this is laying out that. But you got to remember, this book was written by those Messianic agendas, people who followed those Messianic agendas. And so by following those Messianic agendas, they were pushing their agenda. So this doesn't sound so, blessed or be, because this is them pushing their agenda. So I want to move on to the next one. You have heard me say that it was said to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable for judgment. Whoever insults my brother will be liable to the council. Whoever says, you fool, will be liable to the hell of fire. So if you are offering your gift to the altar, and there remember that your brother is something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you're going with him to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and put you in prison. Truly I say to you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. It's actually hard for me to read that one. Why? Because it's all about fear and judgment, and you better be right, and you better follow our rules, and you better not mess up, and you better not even say a harsh word to anybody. Because if you do, you're going to be burned in hellfire. This is absolutely nothing Jeshua would have said. He wouldn't have said it, because he wouldn't have been focused in that direction. He wouldn't have thought that way, right? If you look at the, blessed are the blankety blank blanks, right? He didn't say, you all suck and you're going to be judged for just not being nice. He never said things like that, because it wasn't what he taught, because he taught by example, and the example was to be loving. He lived loving, so he expressed loving, so people saw loving and people became loving. So that one in my mind is completely off base. Going on to the next one now. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than lose your whole body, be thrown into hell. If your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than your whole body go into hell. So once again, you're going to burn in hell. You're going to burn in hell. If you're even slightly bad, cut your arm off, gouge your eye out. There's no way that Jeshua said that. There's no way Jeshua said that. Because he was all about empowering. Greater works than I have done you will do. It is your faith that heals you. Those are statements that I can believe he said, because of the idea that that was what he taught. He taught the loving essence and being joyful, loving, and creating a world that is full of love, and not creating fear and anxiety and telling yourself you're a bad and horrible person who's constantly sinning just by thinking, boy, that woman's attractive, right? This is just so far removed from anything he ever taught. It was also said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife, except on the ground of sexual immorality, makes her commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. So, ladies, what do you think of that one? You know, you got your husband left you. He didn't say that you were having sexual immorality, but if you ever hook up with anybody else, then you are committing adultery against him. Yeah, no way did Jeshua say that. There's no way at all that he would have said something like that. First of all, the concept of marriage itself is a religious construct. There is no need to get married. There is no law that says you must get married except for in religion. And why do they want you to get married? They want you to get married into the religion so that you can procreate and make more people for the religion. That's why marriages exist on paper and in religious constructs. There's no reason why you have to get married. It's people like it. I know I must have really liked it because I've done it 3 times, right? But there's really no reason. You're not forced to do it. You don't have to do it, right? You can live a loving life. Look at Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell. They've been together over 40 years. They're not married, but they have one of the most beautiful, loving relationships in the world. It's a matter of who needs marriage. If you need it, and from my personal experience, many people get married and instantly change because now they go, oh, I don't have to worry about losing them now, right? And it's harder for them to get out. But the people who as Nietzsche would say, foster the friendship, have better relationships. They just love each other and they treat each other well and they give each other slack when they need slack and they give each other support when they need support. And they, loving relationships are 2 people who choose to walk side by side in life and enhance each other's lives as they go. But there's nowhere that says you have to get married. And this whole thing of committing adultery it's a breaking of the law of marriage, So I wouldn't necessarily put much stock into this one either. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. And do not take an oath on your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than that comes from evil. Evil. Right? This whole thing is telling you not to debate. It's telling you to take everything. It's either this way or that way, and there is no middle ground. There is no gray area. Don't get into swearing this or swearing that. Don't. Now I will say this: don't go talking off the cuff and not actually having a real opinion. But the idea of this is not about that. And when you dive into, or by Jerusalem, for this is the city of the great King, David. Okay, King David. They even called Jeshua the son of David. Why did they call him that? Because David was the Jewish great king. He was laying into the Judaic Messianic sect. He was trying to make him be the law. And this whole thing is telling you, you're being bad. Don't be bad. It's horrible for you to be bad and break our laws and go against the great king. Totally. One more. So you see how with this whole speech, the beginning was beautiful and loving and caring, and then the whole bottom part of this is fear-based and judgmental and based in trying to push forward this Judaic Messianic belief. But the Buddha said the secret to enlightenment was the eradication of fear. And the Psalm says, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me, right? For God is with you, for love is with you. And if God is love and God is our benefactor, which I don't even look at it that way, but would God want you to be fearful if God is love? So that makes no sense. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. If anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let them have your cloak as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who would borrow from you. This is a very interesting one, because do not resist the one who is evil. That's the first part. The one who is evil, evil, who's not doing loving things, basically. But if someone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to the other one also. Basically, this is not a, let them just beat you up statement. What this really is a don't escalate statement. Let them hit you again. Don't worry about it. Let it go, because it's not really worth it to escalate it, because it only gets worse and worse. Again, if someone takes something from you, give them your tunic, right? Or give them your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Go over and above for people. This is actually not a bad statement, but it's peppered with the words evil and an eye for an eye and a tooth for tooth. It's talking about the Judaic scriptures. Do not refuse someone who would borrow from you. If you have it, if you have it to give and it does, you don't need it, absolutely, right? I absolutely share it, It's a matter of I don't think this is necessarily that bad of a statement, but the interesting thing is it's called retaliation, right? That's what this piece is called. Give the one who begs from you, do not refuse the one who would borrow from you. Love one another, right? And don't escalate their crap. Don't feed their crap. This is actually a pretty good statement, this one. I like this one. I don't think it's as beautiful as the top ones, but I like it. Now we're getting tricky. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if they greet only their brothers, what more are you doing than others? Do not even to the Gentiles do the same. You therefore must be perfect, as your heavenly Father is perfect. When you're dealing with people in life, and people come at you negatively and come to attack you, or they want to persecute you, as this thing says. What I do in those situations is the first thing I say is, what is their fear? What are they afraid of? And I come to the realization of what they're afraid of. And when I come to that realization, I can go directly at that fear and offer a solution. And a lot of times it's just a matter of naming it so that they recognize what they're afraid of. But when you look at this, love your neighbor and hate your enemies, I say love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. He says, love everyone. Love everyone. Whatever you do to the least of my brothers, that you do unto me, right? Love everyone. And when you love everyone, then you are not the one escalating. You're not the one who's going to the next level of struggle and strife. You're the one who's not perpetuating that feeling that they're throwing. You're not carrying it on. You're breaking the cycle of it. It is an interesting statement, and I think there probably is some truth in this one. So, like I said, the bottom part of the speech is very interesting because there's a lot of this old messianic belief mixed in with some things that might actually have truth to them. But even in this, he talks about evil and good and the dichotomy, and that dichotomy I think is more semantic in the modern term than it was back then. Those who would do harm or do in evil, right? And I think for the most part, you can usually replace the word evil with the word fear, and you'll find a very unique understanding of most of your life. And then at the end, it asks you to be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. This is something that's throughout all Abrahamic, or I'll say Abrahamic religions, which is Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And the Baha'i faith says they are also of that same vein. The need to be perfect. In Islam, they believe that Muhammad lived the perfect life as the example for us to follow. I personally believe that Jeshua was showing us the way, the truth, and the life to emulate. So he was living the perfect life, per se, and we are to emulate that life. I also find it interesting that the Quran says, "You shall not deify Muhammad as the Christians have deified Jesus, the son of Mary," or Isa, the son of Mary. So I find that interesting. But this concept of being perfect, striving to be perfectly loving, that's basically what that means. So that's not a bad one. So this concludes part 1 of the discussion on the Sermon on the Mount. The following session, the final session, will be next week. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you there. See ya.